So I just want to introduce again Shelly Fox, Donna Karen Professor and the Director of our MFA Design and Society, and Lucia Cuba, who's an alumna of the program.
Thank you, everybody, for attending this event, and I think it's been such an interesting day, especially since in light of what's happened. But I'll move quickly because I know we have limited time. But just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm the Donna Karen Professor of Fashion, and Donna Karen initiated my position here at Parsons. I'm the Director of the MFA Fashion Design Society program, which launched in fall 2010. So we've just had our first 18 graduating students in 2012, with a curriculum that brings together design thinking, film, photography, fashion presentation, fashion theory, and also the really kind of special thing that the New School offers is the accessibility to other divisions across, such as the New School for Social Research and other areas. So the students are able to tap into things like anthropology and other such topics. We recently had the MFA exhibition in May 2012, the MFA magazine, and then New York Fashion Week in September at Milk Studios. Just to give you an idea, we have 18 students graduated. Within that is 13 nationalities within 18 students. And the types of students that we are bringing through on the MFA has been really interesting for me, from fashion, architecture, curation, which really brings me on to my introduction to Lucia, and I'm really going to try and read your bio well. So Lucia is one of my recent graduates from 2012, Lucia Cuba, fashion designer and researcher. Lucia studied a bachelor's in social psychology, a master's in educational psychology and human development, a PhD in public health, and a fashion designer, all in Peru. She coordinated programs with sustainability and development and worked as a consultant in public health and as a teacher of psychology and fashion design. She participated in projects for the development of the local and regional fashion systems in Peru. She is the curator and director of LUCO, a design lab, and a project Gamara, which is an activist design initiative that aims to inform and rethink Lima's Garment and Textile Center. Her work was recently presented and awarded in the Ibero-American Design Biennial in Madrid. And after receiving a Fulbright scholarship from Peru in 2010, she attended the MFA and graduated recently. So she's currently an artist in residence at the Textile Arts Center in Brooklyn and a visiting associate professor at Pratt Institute. So one of the images we have on the board here is something that was very personal to Lucia's final thesis collection. And really, I really want to hand it over to Lucia to really talk about that in depth. And just to ask you one question is, what did you think, after all your impressive educational pursuits, what did the MFA mean to you, and what did you get from that? And maybe talk about the project in a bigger way.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. Well, the MFA was an extraordinary platform to actually share a space of multicultural knowledge, create new interactions, share moments, and especially rethink different approaches towards fashion design. Everyone that formed the project, and in this case the MFA, was pretty much active with their own way of thinking and doing within a fashion design practice. What you are seeing back here is the actual text, which is originally in Spanish, on the Article 6 of the General Health Law of Peru. It might not mean too much for us in this audience right now here until we are going to try to connect this with an actual fashion design project. One of the things that I am personally interested in is in the possibility that has fashion and fashion design, in particular garments, to impact as agents in different ways of transforming, informing, creating awareness, and development in general. I try to approach my work in a very interdisciplinary way, and coming from a social science background, I like to think that from a design perspective, I maintain both sides in a very strong way. And the project I presented as part of the MFA thesis project is called Articulos 6, Narratives of Gender, Strength, and Politics. which is also a platform to rethink the agency of clothes and to create awareness around a very delicate subject that is unfortunately still pending on being solved back home. So Articulos is an activist design project that aims to raise awareness about the case of forced sterilizations implemented during the government of Alberto Fujimori in Peru. This is a very recent case. This happened less than 15 years ago. It's unfortunately still unsolved. It's at the district attorney office, and it's something that as Peruvians, as citizens, as being engaged or not directly with the topic, was something that I wanted to rethink, reconstruct, and inform people about the fact that this wasn't solved and that this is still something pending, and how can we get engaged with such a topic like that from a fashion design perspective. So the project consists of a collection of 34 pieces of garments and 12 actions. The different actions that are built within the project are pretty much built around the idea of garments having agency and being activated in different spaces and among different audiences. So these garments may be reinterpreted, may be analyzed in very diverse ways from a very, let's say, complex and analytical perspective, perhaps even theoretical approach to an aesthetical analysis, and they can literally have a life on its own once they are performed and activated in these very different environments. So the first action of the project was to create a set of images that could create an image narrative around the case. The different garments that you are going to see consist of different fragments of testimonies of the victims, of fragments of political speeches. They are embroidered and cut in different spaces. They work around the idea of design and design patterns, also having a very strong conceptual approach to the subject. For example, exaggerated waistbands as spaces to repress the body, cuts to literally interrupt different processes like fertility, the choose or the right to choose on your own sexual and reproductive health. The images that I'm going to show are part of the first set of images that were shot from the collection. This was before the formal launch of the project during the MFA graduation activities.
Can I just ask you something, Lucia? Just some of the things you were just talking about then about the aesthetic and the political. One of the things that I remember really distinctly when we were working towards all the fittings, all the designers generally on the MFA, the design tutorials end up being fittings in the corridor, and that's how we really work, because that's when everything comes alive. And some of the things that I remember the most with you, which was really good, interesting, was you had such a strong political idea around this research, but it's like, how do we get that across without it being so literal? So I remember around before or during spring break, I can't remember when, you were going back to Peru, and your collection wasn't formed at that point. The ideas were coming, you had really strong ideas, but it was like, we couldn't get to the nitty-gritty of what that collection was looking like. And you were and I said, just go back and take photographs, just go back to anyway, you came back with all these amazing pictures, but you still couldn't pull out what it was, and it's always easier that's my job, to, pull out what I see. As we were laying them all out, what we could see was these amazing women in Peru, kind of in action in the markets, whatever they're going about their business, but it was always about the skirts and the hair, but their faces were never in the photographs. And you were talking about how it was kind of a respect for this distance of respecting and photographing these women, but it was all about the skirts. It was, and we talked about how it came about through the focus on the skirts, the focus on the message, and also that my opinion only, if you try and bang a message home, something politically, but it doesn't have an aesthetic, maybe the political gets lost. So it has to have something to draw you in aesthetically. And we had this real battle, not together or opposite, but this struggling through how to think about fashion or clothing and let the work speak for itself, and then people then get drawn in, and then the political gets uncovered, and then there's a conversation. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how the hair and the cutting and that literal cutting, expand on that with the embroidery?
Yeah, sure. Well, the actual challenge of trying to combine social science with fashion design is where to or not set a boundary between what can be analyzed or perceived as superficial or only aesthetical, which is not bad, but it's one point of view within the fashion systems. And the other one, when does an actual garment can go beyond just this aesthetical validation or perception and create a context that can promote a new conversation around different topics. And that's something that it's pretty much in my mind every time I approach my work. It was definitely, and it is still a challenge when it comes to going from one point the creative process and trying to literally create an object that can transmit that kind of information. Well, during this process, it was a very long process of how to identify exactly where we're approaching our work, and especially how to be very specific about trying to work within a very difficult case and delicate one, in a very political way without being offensive to the people that were involved in the case, but also trying to respect these two languages within fashion and within social science. And throughout this process, the idea of engaging actively is somehow attached to the idea of having these different mediums activated in very distinctive ways and in spaces that are beyond just an MFA program, like in this case. So they have a life on its own, even once outside the school environment, and especially they carry out a lot of content that has to do with where I come from, how do I approach, in general, my work, but especially to how can we create a space within garments to engage actively in social issues.
I think also just like the shoot that you showed.
Yes, exactly. So within that analysis, the idea of bringing in, from an aesthetical perspective, for example, a representation of the indigenous woman with braiding and covering a face, because we didn't need to necessarily create a new body for this, since we were already using typical garments such as polleras or skirts, like the ones you are seeing here, in a reinterpreted way. And the idea of creating this anonymous woman that could be also located not only in Peru or within this case, but that could open a conversation around an image and not necessarily only around the case. The other decision was to, for example, for this initial photo shoot, to locate it in a similar space, like in the spaces where these forcibly sterilizations were promoted, which is definitely in the highlands in Peru and other areas around the country. This is a fashion shoot editorial, and it does respect a language within that. That's a model. It's a Peruvian model. And the idea of trying to bring elements that could allow us to have a much more bigger conversation around a fashion shoot was something that we were definitely delicate in trying to bring into this particular photo shoot. So that was considered like the first action of the project. These images have been very representative for the project until now. They have been very diverse mediums in different press, local and international press, and they do relate in a very strong way with this idea of indigenous women fashion aesthetical analysis, and also the creating awareness around something that is there that you can or may connect with something else with more information around that. Different actions have been defined as part of the project. Some of them were pretty much attached to the different activities of the MFA graduation process, such as the graduation installation that we had in May, where the decision of not putting the garments literally into mannequins was something intentional, in terms of not locating one particular body within this really dense and conceptual bodies that I was trying to share and put out there. So the installation was also complemented by text that is similar to a text that you read at the beginning, with information about the case and the project, and with information about how could you get involved in talking about what happened. This installation also had, as a complement way, 3 videos, 2 much more related to creating a context of the characters that are involved, or the people that are involved in this case, from politicians to the victims. And one particular video that is the activation of the collection throughout the photo shoot is something that, do we have time to share?
Sure. It's a small film about 4 minutes long that I think it's really important to see. You showed this at the MFA exhibition in May in New York City in the Garment Center.
Loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro. Chiara yawai mayu patapi karta mawangispa. Chiara yawai mayu patapi karta mawangispa. Cierto chum, carta maracanqui. Loro chai, 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 loro. Chiara yawai mayu patapi carta moangispa. Cierto chum, carta maracanqui. Loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro. Chiara yawai mayu patapi carta mawangispa. Chiara yawai mayu patapi carta mawangispa. Cierto chum, carta maracanqui. Loro chai, 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 loro. Chiara yawai mayu patapi carta moangispa. Cierto chum, carta maracanqui. Loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro. Chiara yawai mayu patapi carta mawangispa. Chiara yawai mayu patapi carta mawangispa. Cierto chum, carta maracanqui. Loro chai, 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 loro. Ciaraya way mayu patapi carta moangispa. Cierto chum, carta moarakanki. Loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro chai, loro. Ciaraya way mayu patapi carta moangispa. Ciaraya way mayu patapi carta moangispa. Cierto chum, carta moarakanki. Loro chai, 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 loro.
Lucia, also it's just so lovely to see how that you take this idea of something that's so personal and political, but research it, take it back, and keep going back and situating it in the place where it was happening in a really sensitive way. One of the other things that I think we could speak about is your next action, which was Action 3, where there was a conference in Lima. So you then took the collection back to Lima, and this went back 2-3 weeks before New York Fashion Week. So again, it's like got this other life. Maybe you could just speak a little bit more about how that happened.
Yeah, sure. The idea was to share the process of creating the project and launching and opening the project for possible collaborations for the different actions that were to be developed. And one interesting response, which is also a very sad one, was the fact that I was approved to have this presentation in one cultural space back home, which gave me the positive answer like 2 or 3 weeks before traveling. And just a couple of days before traveling back to Lima, I got this email, which is in Spanish. Unfortunately, I don't know if everyone will read it, but it clearly says that they can't go on anymore with my presentation, had to be canceled because it was too political and the cultural space wasn't allowed to talk about religion or politics. Which actually also highlights the fact that a very strong corrupted system is still very present, and the people that are involved in this case, unfortunately, are still and have still a lot of power in very diverse institutions back home, which is another challenge. I end up presenting the creative process in a cultural space, another one. It was a very interesting moment to share, and very perhaps without being aware of what was going to happen even in these following actions and different stages of the process. The action 4, which is an action of creating meta pieces from the project, is something that we'll keep on developing, like the accessories that go and complement the process. There are another let's say, smaller capsule projects within this project, like creating identity masks and highlighting different garment elements and iconic garments that are part of different actors involved in this case. And the runway performance, which definitely marks a new direction within the project, was something a bit unexpected and expected at the same time. This was as part of the graduation runway that we had as part of the program. There were different challenges around that in terms of the runway itself, the styling issues, music, and different things that we had to deal with internally, especially.
I mean, I can just speak a little bit more to that. I mean, it's really, as people know, when you've got 18 students who all have their own identity and you're sending them down the same runway, there's always things you have to deal with. And one of the things, I mean, we did open the show with Lucia, and on the strength of her collection, we had, in my view, very strong collections anyway. And we were really, having a struggle with how do we attach those hair pieces and then deattach them, and then do the next change when you've got 150 looks going down the catwalk in New York Fashion Week at Milk Studios. So we had to come to a compromise. It was either that or, unfortunately, Lucia would have had to get her own models, and she had 10 outfits and 14 to choose from. I mean, we always require 8. She always pushes the extra mile. Ended up doing 14 outfits, but we at least had stuff to edit from. And one of the other things I just wanted to talk about really quickly, because I know you've not mentioned that, but what one of the things that we really brought out from this collection was that all the shirts are very military-like. They're very strict, and it was this idea of the focus being on the skirts, because it was the skirts of the women that lived in the mountains that were being. That was the story of the collection. So the militarization of the shirts was in a reference to what was going on, but looks beautiful, however, and has this strength. So I think, for me, it was really, really interesting to see Lucia go from this to exhibition, to conferences, to New York Fashion Week on a runway, to then I think what we should then go, oh, no, we've got one more thing to, because she's done so many. So the next action before the next one is the Expose, and you did this incredible street intervention, political street intervention. This was in Lima.
Yes, this was very recently. This was in January. The idea is, well, there are 12 actions involved in this project. They are not set to a specific time schedule, but they're definitely activated in different environments and within different people. The idea of taking the streets and putting the actual health law article outside was to visualize something that might be obvious and underestimated, and it's actually something that it's violated every single day, not only in terms of the case, but in terms of how can we or not, or we want or not to be engaged with our human rights, our sexual and reproductive rights, especially in a Peruvian context. The idea is to keep on, taking these different actions not only within a garment perspective or a garment's life, but from the different topics that can be discussed around this project. And something that I consider as, the different remaining actions are still to be defined in the following year and are depend on different collaborations that I can also have with artists. There's a website for the project which informs about the project and the case, a blog that is specialized in different news around the case as well, and that is working collaboratively with different NGOs and activists locally. And some indirect actions that weren't necessarily expected to become actions, but definitely had to do with actions. This is really short, it's 6 seconds. Oh, we have to stop. Oh, yeah, okay. I think it's not pulling it out. Well, it's Lady Gaga.
Funny enough.
Wearing the actual Article 6 of the General Health Law of Peru during a random presentation on the launch of her perfume, which had nothing to do with the project, but that had to do with an aesthetical approach to the pieces, which is something that is, at least for me as a designer and for this project, something that is definitely conceived and approved as part of how they can be activated in very different environments. What Lady Gaga perhaps didn't estimate it is that she was going to end up validating not only the case, but the fact that she was actually aware about the General Health Law of Peru and about pretty much Peruvian sexual and reproductive health. And it went, I don't know if it was viral or not, but it was definitely, it took attention of not only local media, but media around the region. I had reviews from Venezuela, Mexico, Argentina, Chile. It was really, really intense. Every single media takes it in a very different way. Sometimes it has to do with nationality, so it's about the Peruvian fashion designer that was capable of dressing this star, or about the fact that this star dressed with the Peruvian law. So there are so many different ways of reading this. What happened fortunately, because it's very positive, is that it created a new space that we didn't have before. And it's an open conversation about, in one hand, realizing that this case is still an unsolved case, and there has to be a social reaction around that. We have to keep on promoting, informing, and creating awareness around so many unfortunate human rights abuse cases, especially in Peru. And the other space that created was a conversation around the agency of clothes, which we didn't have back home. And now fashion design blogs are also talking about the possibility of taking action and taking part of social issues within creating garments and fashion design. These are just very different reviews around the project and the case, but well.
Thank you, Lucia. And I also just it was a really interesting time because we thought, we've done Fashion Week, we're done, we can carry on with the semester. We couldn't, the office turned into a press office. The students weren't leaving. They were still being mentored. The garments were still there. The collections were still there. They were being called in by every press stylist, you name it. Nicola Formichetti was on the phone calling in collections, and they went with Lucia's. I mean, there is stories that I think his assistant or somebody working on the project could actually read it. They could read the dress, and then they realized, and we still don't know. There's been many kind of conversations around, did she know, or we don't really know all of that information, but I just think it's been a really interesting time just to show about, Lucy is one of many of the 18 students, and again, it's just, some students have gone on to work at Donna Karan, DKNY, CK Jeans, Calvin Klein, Narcisco Rodriguez. I mean, most of them, I would say 95% of them are in work since graduating in May, and the fashion show in September, which for me is a hugely successful way to go. And I think also just to see the dynamic and the different types of students that can go through a fashion MFA and then represent itself. And again, it's what I was saying last night at the book launch. I constantly feel like I learn. Everything's a new challenge. So I think, and a learning experience. But we are on a time limit, as I know, so we'd really like to open up to the floor for Q&A and see if anyone here has any questions. But thank you anyway, Lucia.
Thank you, too.
Really great.
Does anyone have any questions? We have a few minutes. Thank you so much, Shelly and Lucia. It was really amazing. Thank you.
We do have some magazines of the MFA left here. If there's people traveling that are and leaving New York soon, I suggest they go to them first. And if other people who are based in New York City want one, then they could email me and I can have one sent. So thank you. Oh, one more thing. I'm so sorry, Ron. This, Drawing with Scissors. Carl Farmer, professor on the MFA, is part of the faculty of the School of Fashion. This is continuing. It's not being cancelled. Tomorrow night, private view, an event party. So come rain or snowstorm, it's continuing. So, okay, you're all invited, of course. So thank you.